Picture this. It is 1975. You are 8 years old, wind in your hair, bouncing around in the back of Dad's HQ Holden ute as he drives to the beach. No seatbelt, no worries, just the smell of salt air and the promise of a meat pie at the kiosk. That same afternoon, you might light a skyrocket in the backyard, ride your bike without a helmet, and watch Mum smoke a cigarette on the train home. None of it was illegal. All of it was completely normal. But try any of that today and you would be looking at fines, demerit points, or a very stern talking to from the authorities. So what changed? And why were we so relaxed about things that now seem genuinely dangerous? Let us take a trip back to the 1970s in Australia and look at 15 things that were perfectly normal back then but are completely illegal or banned today. Here is something most Australians do not know. Victoria was the first place in the entire world to make seatbelts compulsory, December 1970. While the rest of the world was still debating whether seatbelts were a good idea, Victoria just went ahead and made them law. New South Wales followed in 1971, and by January 1972, every state in Australia had mandatory seatbelt laws. Before that, only about 5% of cars even had seatbelts fitted, and of those that did, maybe a quarter of drivers actually wore them. The result of the law was immediate. Victoria's road toll dropped 13% in the first year alone, from 1,061 deaths down to 923. In 1970, Australia lost 3,798 people on our roads. That is the highest road toll we have ever recorded. Seatbelts changed everything. Australia led the world again in 1990 when Victoria became the first place on Earth to make bicycle helmets compulsory. Before that law, only about 31% of cyclists wore helmets. Within a year, it jumped to 75%. Head injury claims dropped 48% in the first year and 70% by the second. By July 1992, every state had followed Victoria's lead. Now, there was controversy. Bicycle use among children dropped 36% after the law came in. Some argued we traded freedom for safety, but the numbers on head injuries were hard to argue with. If you grew up in Australia before the mid-1980s, you remember Cracker Night, the smell of gunpowder, the hiss of a skyrocket launching from an empty beer bottle, the satisfying bang of a double bunger, kids running around with sparklers while Dad supervised the Catherine wheel nailed to the back fence. Every state had their own version. Guy Fawkes Night in November, Empire Day in May. It was one of the biggest nights of the year. Then came the bans. Queensland went first in 1972. South Australia followed in 1974. Victoria banned bungers in 1974 and all shot fireworks by 1982. NSW held out until June 1986. The ACT was last, finally banning backyard fireworks in 2009. The reason was simple. Fireworks were the third largest cause of EY injuries in Queensland before the ban. Letterboxes were getting blown apart. Kids were losing fingers. The fun was real, but so were the trips to the emergency room. Today, you can still experience Cracker Night in the Northern Territory on July 1st or in Tasmania in May. For the rest of us, it lives only in memory. This one hits different if you grew up in regional Australia, piling into the back of Dad's ute with your mates, sitting on the wheel arches, hair flying everywhere as you bounce down dirt roads to the swimming hole. Today, every state has laws against it. New South Wales will fine you $349 and 3 demerit points. Western Australia fines are even higher, up to $900 and 4 demerit points. The law is simple. If there is no seatbelt, you cannot sit there. But for a generation of Australian kids, the tray of a ute was basically a mobile playground. Before the mid-1970s, having a few beers and driving home was just what blokes did. Sure, there were drink driving laws on the books, but proving someone was actually drunk was nearly impossible. Victoria introduced random breath testing in 1976. NSW followed in 1982, with one of the most famous ad campaigns in Australian history. The message was simple: if you drink and drive, you are a bloody idiot. The impact was staggering. Fatal crashes dropped 19.5% overall. During holidays, the drop was 30%. Before random breath testing, the culture around drinking and driving was almost casual. After it, everyone knew someone who had been pulled over and blown into a bag. Imagine boarding a flight to Perth and the person next to you lights up a cigarette. That was completely normal until December 1987, when Australia banned smoking on domestic flights. International flights took longer. Smoking was not banned on all Australian international flights until July 1996. Before the bans, planes had ashtrays built into the armrests. Flight attendants handed out cigarettes. The cabin was a permanent haze of smoke. Melbourne led the charge here too. On the 15th of November 1976, Victoria banned smoking on all suburban trains. It was one of the first such bans in Australia. Before that, train carriages were divided into smoking and non-smoking sections. Country trains on V-Line did not go smoke-free until 1989. If you commuted in the 1970s, secondhand smoke was just part of the journey. Pop down to the corner shop and grab a packet of Winfield Blues for your old man. In the 1970s, nobody batted an eyelid when a 10-year-old walked into a milk bar and bought cigarettes. The shopkeeper knew whose kid you were. Dad had probably phoned ahead. Today, selling tobacco to anyone under 18 is a serious offence. For decades, kids were basically cigarette couriers for their parents. 6 of the best: the strap, the cane. In the 1970s in Australia, teachers could hit students, and it was not only legal, it was expected. Victoria banned corporal punishment in government schools in 1985. New South Wales waited until 1990. Private schools in Victoria could still use it until 2006. Here is the remarkable part. Queensland government schools banned it in 1995, but private schools in Queensland can technically still use corporal punishment today. It is the only state where it remains legal. The backyard pool was the great Australian dream. What we did not dream about was fencing. In the early 1970s, there was nothing between a wandering toddler and that sparkling blue water. Drowning rates for children under 5 increased 50% between 1970 and 1973. South Australia acted first with pool fencing legislation in 1972. New South Wales did not get a statewide standard until 1990. Today, pool fencing laws are strict and heavily enforced. Back then, a pool was just a hole in the ground filled with water. The Fibro House was an Australian icon. We just did not know it was slowly killing people. Australia had one of the highest per capita asbestos use rates in the world. It was in our walls, our roofs, our brake pads, our stovetops, our water pipes. More than 3,000 products contained asbestos. The total ban did not come until the 31st of December 2003. Today, asbestos kills approximately 4,000 Australians every year. About 1/3 of homes built before 1990 still contain it. Fill her up with super. Every time you filled the tank in the 1970s, you were pumping lead into the air. Lead in the petrol, lead in the exhaust. Lead settling on playgrounds and backyards. Unleaded petrol was introduced in 1986, but leaded fuel was not completely phased out until 1st of January 2002. Blood lead levels in Australian children dropped dramatically after the ban. Kids bounced around the back seat like ping pong balls, standing up to look out the window, no worries, sitting on mum's lap in the front seat. Perfectly normal. Lying across the back parcel shelf for a nap on a long trip? Classic. Child car seat laws did not become mandatory until the 1980s. Today, children under 7 must be in an appropriate car seat. A 2019 report found that 1/3 of children who died on New South Wales roads would likely have survived if they had been properly restrained. 2 heavy acrylic balls on a string. Simple. Addictive, dangerous. Clackers swept through Australian schoolyards in the early 1970s. The sound was unmistakable. Click, clack, click-clack echoing across every playground. The problem? The balls sometimes shattered on impact, sending shrapnel flying. Children ended up with black eyes, cracked wrists, and worse. Schools banned them almost overnight. They were declared a mechanical hazard and pulled from shelves. This one shaped Australian drinking culture for generations. From 1916, pubs were required to close at 6 o'clock. The idea was to get workers home to their families. The reality? Workers sprinted to the pub at 5 o'clock and drank as fast as humanly possible before closing time. It created a culture of speed that lasted decades. Pubs had special troughs to catch spilled beer. Bartenders lined up dozens of glasses in advance. The 6 o'clock closing was gradually relaxed through the late 1970s, extending to 10 o'clock and eventually later. But the drinking culture it created, that took much longer to shake. Looking back at this list, it is easy to feel two things at once: nostalgia for a time that felt freer, and relief that we learned some hard lessons about safety. The 1970s were not better or worse. They were just different, and the changes we made, from seatbelts to pool fences to random breath testing, have saved countless Australian lives. If you grew up in this era, you probably survived things that would horrify parents today. And somehow, most of us turned out all right. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, please subscribe and join us for more stories from dear old Australia. We will see you in the next one.